The first time Threx saw the beast, he dropped his translator tablet, stumbled backward over his own foot tentacle, and slammed into the kitchen wall hard enough to rattle the hanging colander. The beast blinked lazily at him from the floor, stretched its limbs like a miniature predator preparing to strike, and let out a low, vibrating growl. Threx's skin flushed pale green. "Contain it," he hissed, voice trembling. "It's watching me. It has vertical pupils. Those are ocular structures of ambush carnivores." Jason Jarrett, who was crouched by the refrigerator in plaid pajama pants and a faded university t-shirt, didn't even glance up. "You mean Jellybean?" Threx pointed a shaking digit. "That name is a deception. That is no bean of jelly. That is a dense furred apex organism. It licked its lips." Jason stood, holding a half-empty milk carton. "She's a cat, Threx. A house cat. She's harmless." The cat in question, a large orange tabby with one torn ear and the general aura of a retired bar brawler, flicked her tail and let out a sharp, disapproving meow. She made a noise. "Is that a vocal warning? Should I lower my posture?" Threx asked, already halfway into a defensive crouch. Jason sighed. "You've seen warships vaporize meteoroids, but a 12-pound cat has you ready to faint." "I have studied hostile fauna of over 63 worlds," Threx muttered, eyes fixed on the feline. "None voluntarily sleep with their teeth exposed." Jason took a long drink from the milk carton, set it on the counter, and picked up the tablet Threx had dropped. "You broke it again." "It leapt at me." "It walked past you," Jason corrected. "She's old. Her knees click when she jumps." Threx narrowed his gaze. "Your species voluntarily cohabitates with these." Jason grinned. "Millions of us. We feed them, clean up after them, and let them sit on our laptops while we work." Threx studied the cat again. She was now grooming herself with the slow, grave seriousness of something that had survived worse. "This is concerning." Jason gave the tablet a once-over and handed it back. "You're going to have to get used to it. You're here for 7 months. I'm not locking Jellybean in a room because you're allergic to her vibes." "I'm not allergic," Threx muttered. "I'm caught." Jason shrugged and walked off toward the hallway. "Suit yourself. Orientation starts in 20 minutes. Don't be late." Threx stood in the kitchen for several more seconds, staring at the cat. Jellybean stared back, blinked slowly, and yawned. The yawn showed all her teeth. By the end of the first week, Threx had compiled a 74-page report on domestic terrestrial felines, complete with diagrams, speculative evolutionary charts, and a list of behavioral inconsistencies that, in his words, suggest a sapient-level deception strategy. Jason flipped through it while eating cereal. "You wrote this instead of doing your xenohistory assignment?" "Your professor doesn't require students to submit until next week," Threx said. "Also, he uses Comic Sans in his presentation slides. That undermines his credibility." Jason snorted. "Fair." Jellybean leapt onto the table. Threx froze. Jason didn't. "Don't worry," Jason said, sliding his bowl away. "She just wants the milk." "She wants nutrients from your diet?" "She wants the milk," Jason repeated, "not the cereal. Watch." He put down the spoon. Jellybean sniffed the bowl, then dipped a paw in and licked it delicately. Threx pulled out his recording lens and began filming. "It uses its limb as a tool. I knew it." Jason gave him a look. "You said she was dangerous." "Tools imply cognition. Cognition implies planning. Planning is dangerous." "Threx, she's a cat. She's not going to overthrow your empire." Threx muttered, "Not alone." The second incident happened during the interspecies culture fair. Each student had to bring something representative of their home. Jason brought a vinyl record of 1960s soul music, a small photo album of his family, and Jellybean in a soft-sided carrier. "Are you insane?" Threx asked when Jason unzipped the mesh flap. "She gets anxious if I leave her alone too long," Jason said. "She's chill. Look." Jellybean meowed softly and walked out. She made a beeline for a sunbeam on the floor and collapsed in it, like a rag soaked in sunlight. I thought this was a peace gathering, Threx said. Now we have a predator in the room. She's sleeping. She's plotting. Despite Threx's protests, Jellybean became the unofficial mascot of the event. Several other alien students came over to pet her. One even tried to analyze her purring frequency and got swatted. Jason apologized, gave Jellybean a treat, and the alien left with a light scratch and a new respect for feline boundaries. Threx stood nearby, arms crossed. They're being fooled. Jason handed him a juice box. If you keep glaring, she's going to start glaring back. She already does. She stares at me at night. You sure you're not just seeing your reflection? Threx didn't answer. It wasn't until the third month that things escalated. Jason had gone out for groceries. Threx had stayed back to work on a systems engineering project, seated on the floor with a tangle of wires and a soldering tool. He was halfway through rerouting a power converter when Jellybean entered the room. Threx glanced up. We are not doing this again. The cat sat, tail flicking. I'm armed, Threx warned, holding up the soldering tool. She blinked. I am aware of your tactics, he continued, feigning innocence, approaching slowly, then, when the moment is right. Jellybean pounced, not on him but on the wire bundle. Threx yelped and flailed backward, knocking over the coffee table. His elbow smacked a metal leg and sent a jolt of pain up his arm. Jellybean, unfazed, batted a dangling cable with practiced glee. Jason walked in moments later to find Threx on the floor, clutching his arm, and the cat tangled in wire like a furry spaghetti monster. What happened? Jason asked, kneeling. She attacked the components, Threx hissed through clenched teeth. I warned her. She showed no mercy. Jason helped him sit up and examined the arm. You might have bruised it. Can you bend it? Threx tried and winced. Jason frowned. All right, hospital time, just to be safe. What about the beast? Jason looked at Jellybean, who had now found a zip tie and was chewing it. She'll be fine. The doctor, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Walsh, took one look at Threx's swollen elbow and sent him for imaging. Jason sat in the waiting room, bouncing one leg, texting updates to the university's alien liaison officer. 30 minutes later, Threx returned with a soft brace and a sour expression. Not broken, he said, but the joint is inflamed. I must rest it for several days. Jason stood. You okay? I am humiliated. Jason patted his friend's shoulder. You got taken out by a cat toy. We've all been there. It was not playing with it. Still counts. After that, Threx avoided Jellybean with religious fervor. He took alternate routes through the apartment, kept his bedroom door locked, and wore elbow pads while assembling his robotics project. Jason didn't push him. But he did, one day, leave a small envelope on Threx's desk. Inside was a photo. Jellybean, asleep on the couch, curled in a perfect circle. On the back, Jason had written, "Still just a cat." Threx stared at it for a long time. Then he placed it in the drawer, closed it gently, and sighed. 2 weeks after the incident with the wires, Threx still hadn't touched the living room floor. He floated just above it now, cross-legged in the air like a meditating squid, his hover harness making a soft whining noise every time he adjusted position. A long coil of light-sensitive filament snaked from his tablet to the carpet, gathering environmental data. Jellybean lay sprawled beneath the coffee table, belly up, every claw sheathed in a show of disinterest so exaggerated it felt theatrical. Jason walked in, carrying a canvas bag from the campus market. You're going to burn out that battery pretending the floor is lava. It is not the floor I distrust, Threx said without looking up. It is what lurks upon it. Thinks he hasn't moved in 40 minutes. She is conserving energy. Jason dropped the bag onto the counter and pulled out 2 apples, a wedge of cheese, and a pack of batteries. So are you, apparently. I am conducting a behavioral analysis. But floating? From a safe observational elevation. Jason took a bite of his apple and leaned back against the kitchen counter. You know, you could just ask to pet her. Might help. Threx gave a dry, clicking laugh. Touch it. She won't bite. That is statistically unsupported. Jason shrugged and reached into the bag again. You're lucky no one else lives here. You'd have to explain why your room smells like ozone and you've duct taped your door seams. Threx finally looked up from his tablet. It was thermal tape. Duct tape leaves residue. Jason tossed him one of the batteries. You're unbelievable. Thank you. Jason turned to rinse the apples. That wasn't a compliment. They lapsed into silence, broken only by the occasional crunch and the soft whir of the hover harness adjusting its altitude by centimeters at a time. Jellybean rolled onto her side, gave a half-hearted flick of her ear, and resumed her nap. A soft chime echoed from the tablet. Threx tapped the screen and frowned. Unexpected result. Jason raised an eyebrow. What now? Her body temperature is elevated. He's sunbathing. That's what happens when you lie in a sunbeam. Threx turned the tablet toward him. But she has fur. Fur should trap heat. Prolonged exposure should result in discomfort. She appears. Please. Jason dried his hands on a dish towel. She likes warm spots. Cats just do. Threx stared at the screen. There is no biological imperative for this behavior. Maybe they're just into comfort. Threx narrowed his eyes. That cannot be the sole reason. Comfort is not a survival strategy. Jason walked over and leaned down beside the coffee table. Beanie, he said, you comfy? The cat opened one eye, stared at him, and closed it again. There's your answer. That is not data. Jason patted the cat's side gently. She's alive, not a spreadsheet. Threx folded his arms. She is also an anomaly. Jason walked back to the kitchen. You say that like she's a glitch in the universe. Her ability, she defies categorization. That's kind of her thing. Threx lowered the harness half a meter. Jellybean twitched, but didn't stir. I believe she is ignoring me. That's rude. Jason tapped his tablet. She has standards. Threx tilted his head. What kind of standards? He doesn't like drama. She electrocuted herself with a power cable. Jason raised a finger. She batted a loose wire. That's not drama, that's curiosity. Threx consulted his tablet again. She is statistically more active in your presence. Jason popped a grape into his mouth. Yeah, we've got a bond. I raised her since she was a kitten. Threx blinked. You lived with her during her juvenile phase? Yup. Bottle fed her. Had to teach her how to use the litter box. Threx looked vaguely horrified. Jason laughed. You should have seen her back then. Tiny little thing with a meow like a broken kazoo. Threx floated lower still, now hovering just above the couch cushion. And you kept her? Of course. She's family. Threx stared at the cat again. That is irrational. Jason leaned on the counter. And yet here we are. A long pause followed as Threx watched Jellybean roll lazily onto her stomach and began licking a forepaw with sleepy precision. Suddenly the door chime rang a short, high-toned trill. Jason straightened. Expecting anyone? Threx shook his head. Negative. Jason opened the door and stepped aside as a tall, violet-skinned figure entered, wrapped in a deep blue cloak that shimmered faintly with embedded solar threads. Ambassador Silek, Threx said, surprised. You're early. Silek inclined their narrow head. Your human liaison invited me for tea. Jason blinked. I did? Silek turned. You sent a message last week, timestamped at 23:07 hours. It included a gif of a dancing beverage mug and the words, "Let's do this?" Jason's eyes widened with realization. Oh, right. That was the night I'd tried mixing energy drinks with cold brew. Silek stepped inside gracefully. Your invitation was accepted. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. Well, I've got chamomile and something called Sleepy Time Vanilla. Silek nodded solemnly. I will sample both. They seated themselves at the low table near the window. Threx, now fully grounded on the couch, looked from one to the other. Jason, are you aware that Silic has diplomatic immunity? Yes. And you offered them tea? Jason set water to boil. Yeah. Threx raised both brows. What if they interpret it as a binding ritual? Jason paused. Do you? Silic examined a coaster. No, though I appreciate the caution. The cat stirred. Without warning, she padded over to the table and jumped up with a soft thud, tail flicking. Silic froze. Jason held up a hand. She's just curious. Silic didn't move. It is observing me. She's sniffing you. Jellybean leaned in, touched her nose to Silic's sleeve, and sat down with a small huff. He has chosen, Silic said quietly. Jason poured hot water into 2 mugs. Chosen what? Silic extended a single, delicate finger and brushed the top of Jellybean's head. The cat closed her eyes and leaned into it. To tolerate me. Jason nodded. That's a pretty solid start. Threx stood slowly. She has never done that to me. Jason handed him a mug. She senses unease. She causes unease. Silic sipped their tea. Perhaps she mirrors it. Threx stared at the cat. Then she is? Reflecting my behavior? Jason sat down across from Silic. She's not a mirror, but she picks up on moods, tone, energy. Threx looked genuinely unsettled. She's emotionally reactive. Jason nodded. That's what makes her great company. Silic tilted their head. Perhaps your fear is self-sustaining. I am not afraid, Threx said quickly. Jellybean sneezed. Jason grinned. She disagrees. Silic reached into their pocket and produced a small pouch. Would she accept an offering? Jason peered into the bag. Is that dried kelp? Spiced with mineral dust. A delicacy on my world. Jason shook his head. She's not going to eat that. Silic placed a piece on the table. Jellybean sniffed it, gave a disinterested flick of her tail, and walked away. Silic looked mildly disappointed. I offended her. Jason sipped his tea. Nah, she just doesn't like seaweed. Threx sat again, cautiously. I do not understand how something so small can hold such influence. Jason leaned back. She doesn't try to. She just exists, and we end up orbiting her. Silic nodded slowly. A gravitational personality. Jason raised his mug. To Jellybean, the center of this apartment's solar system. The cat, now curled in a shaft of light, gave no sign of acknowledgement. Threx watched her for a long moment, then reached down slowly, hand hovering just above her back. She didn't move. May I? He asked quietly. Jason smiled. Yeah, go ahead. Threx lowered his hand. The fur was warmer than expected, soft, dense. Jellybean shifted slightly under the touch, then settled, tail wrapped around her legs. She is not what I expected. Jason nodded. She never is. Threx stood in the university's communal kitchen at midday, eyeing a steaming pot of something called chili while holding a ladle like it might activate. The room buzzed faintly with background chatter, students from 3 systems sharing lunch between lectures. The walls were decorated with laminated safety signs in 6 languages, one of which included scent-based syntax. Jason leaned against a table nearby, arms crossed, watching Threx with the mild amusement of someone who'd seen worse experiments go sideways. That's not a weapon, Jason said. You can stir it. I am evaluating the viscosity, Threx replied, tilting the ladle imperceptibly. It appears structurally unstable. Because it's full of beans and ground beef? That's the whole point. From the back of the room, a Lurvani student with skin like obsidian glass and 6 fingers per hand piped up. Is it supposed to smell like combustion? Jason nodded. That's the cumin. It is aggressive, the Lurvani muttered, taking a cautious step back. Threx gave the pot one final swirl and set the ladle down. I will abstain. Jason grabbed a bowl and filled it halfway. Suit yourself. More for me. A low chime signaled someone entering. The door slid open to reveal a pair of uniformed medtechs wheeling in a portable diagnostic unit. Behind them came Dr. Ria Deshmukh, the university's human medical liaison. Her coat was unbuttoned, and she had the unmistakable look of someone who'd been forced to skip lunch. "Which one of you is Threx?" she asked, scanning the room. Threx straightened. "I am?" She walked over, holding a clipboard. "You filed an injury report 3 weeks ago. Elbow trauma?" "I recall the incident." "Good. You never came for your follow-up." Threx hesitated. "I was under the impression recovery was proceeding." "Was it?" She glanced at him. "Any lingering pain, swelling, reduced range of motion?" Jason looked up from his chili. "He hasn't lifted anything heavier than a pencil since." "That's inaccurate," Threx said. "I carried a 6-kilogram drone last Tuesday." "With both hands and a wince," Jason added. Dr. Deshmukh waved toward the diagnostic unit. "Let's check. Arm out." Threx extended his right arm. A med tech applied a flexible cuff around his elbow, which began to hum softly. Data streamed across the screen in a language only the staff could read. "No structural damage," the med tech said, "but the joint's compensating. Overuse in the shoulder." Dr. Deshmukh nodded. "You've been babying it too much. Your body adapted to protect the site, and now everything around it's overworked." Threx frowned. "That does not sound like an optimal biological strategy." "It's not," she said. "Humans do it too. You favor one side, mess up the rest." Jason chewed a mouthful of chili. "So, what's the fix?" "Physical therapy," she said. "Daily exercises, gentle loading, get him moving again." Threx looked skeptical. "You're suggesting I create controlled microdamage for long-term function? That's how healing works." He crossed his arms. "That sounds inefficient." "You want efficient?" she said. "You should have come in when you were told." Jason pointed at the medtech. "Can he do the exercises at home?" "Yeah, I'll send over the program, but he has to actually do it." Threx glanced at Jason. "He will mock me." Jason grinned. "Only a little." Dr. Deshmukh handed Threx a small cylinder. "This tracks joint movement. Wear it during exercises. If you fake it, I'll know." Threx examined the device. "Is this a threat?" "It's accountability." She turned to leave, then paused. "Also, limit time in the hover harness. You've been using it too much." "I required elevation for safety," Threx said. "You're not a chandelier," she replied, and walked out. Silence fell across the kitchen. Jason stirred his chili. "She's good. She's very blunt." Jason nodded. "She has to be. You'd probably argue with a thermometer." Threx looked at the motion tracker. "You will remind me of the exercises?" "I'll make a chart." Later that evening, Threx sat on the living room floor, leaning against a pillow with his elbow held straight. Jason sat nearby with his tablet, lazily scrolling through course materials. Jellybean was nowhere in sight. Jason glanced over. "You're supposed to bend it now." "I was preparing mentally." "You've been preparing for 20 minutes. Threx sighed and flexed his arm slightly. A faint sting radiated from the joint. Not sharp, but persistent. Jason watched. "That's good. Keep going." "Dislike this," Threx muttered. "Welcome to recovery." They sat in companionable silence, save for the occasional creak of Threx's elbow and the low hum of evening traffic outside the window. A breeze drifted in. The smell of someone grilling meat on a nearby balcony wafted through. "I have a question," Threx said suddenly. Jason looked up. "Shoot." "Why do humans tolerate discomfort for future benefit?" Jason tilted his head. "You mean like physical therapy?" "I mean everything. Training, sporting events, spicy food. You pursue experiences that cause temporary hardship." Jason thought for a moment. "Because sometimes pain teaches, or sharpens, or it just makes the good stuff feel better afterward." Threx nodded slowly. "Your species is very committed to voluntary difficulty. We're stubborn like that. Jellybean does not share this tendency." Jason laughed. "She's a cat. She lives for naps and snacks." Threx flexed his elbow again. Perhaps I should emulate that. Jason grinned. You're not flexible enough to nap like she does. A soft clicking sound echoed from the hallway. Jellybean appeared, blinking in the dim light, and padded over. She sniffed Thrax's knee, then sat beside him, and began grooming her paw with meticulous care. Threx watched her. She chooses her moments. He's got timing. Threx extended his hand gingerly. The cat paused, looked at him, then resumed cleaning. He touched her back lightly. She leaned into it, just enough to suggest approval. Jason raised an eyebrow. You two bonding now? I believe we have achieved détente. About time. Threx gave a small nod. She remains unpredictable, but perhaps that is not inherently negative. Jason leaned back. She's a mystery. So are we, sometimes. Threx flexed his arm one last time, then set it down. It is improving. Good. Even if the method is illogical? Jason smiled. That's most human things. We're good at making chaos look like progress. Threx looked at the cat again. And yet, somehow, it works. Jason raised his tablet. Here's to surviving the semester without more feline-induced injuries. Threx inclined his head. That is a goal I can support. Jellybean rolled over, eyes closed, completely unbothered. And for once, Threx didn't flinch.